Hello, welcome to On Me Ed, son. I hope you're all well. So let's just get rid of that intro. I don't know why that's playing. Hold on. Stop that. Hello, welcome to... There we go. Hello, sorry about that. There we go. Right, so I could just hear myself there. Right, hello, welcome to On Me Ed, son. Hope you're all well. So, what is going on here? Essentially, Max Kellerman, Ring Magazine, returned a commentator from boxing, has come out and given his podcast. I think he started his own podcast. I just caught this on another video this morning, totally unaware of it, actually, that he's given his verdict on Alexander Usyk, saying that Alexander Usyk is overrated as a heavyweight. And you'd have to find out for yourself, but basically he's saying that he hasn't really fought anybody. He hasn't really had a long list of, heavyweights that he's fought, and he's overrated. Yes, he's pound for pound, but in terms of heavyweight, he's overrated. And I think that he's getting a bit of a backlash over this. And quite honestly, he deserves every bit of backlash, because to say that Alexander Usyk is overrated, it's almost like he's doing this for sport, and he's trying to just garner any kind of publicity, and whether he's launching his own YouTube channel or podcast or whatever. But regardless of what his intentions in trying to gather momentum, as a well-known figure, or certainly past figure in boxing commentary, and then you've been recently brought back on the American scene in terms of Ring Magazine, and he's certainly, from the Americans' point of view, he's featuring more in boxing content recently. There is a responsibility to not talk bollocks. And that's the thing. You can't talk bollocks when we're doing this kind of thing, or when you're saying this kind of thing. And unfortunately, that's what he's done. He's come out and he's spoken absolute bollocks. Basically, what he's saying is that Usyk is, yes, he pound for pound, but in terms of, he hasn't fought anybody. He hasn't, he's bought, AJ and Fury and everything. So he's very scant about what he's actually saying, and it's complete bollocks, really, absolute complete bollocks. What he said, how he said it. And I say, there's a certain responsibility, because you're going to be speaking to people are going to hear this, who are not really into boxing, who don't fully understand it, or who have a casual interest in it. And then you say, oh yeah, maybe this guy knows what he's talking about. Oh, a commentator knows what he's talking about. Unfortunately, we see this in all sorts of sports. Certainly in boxing we see it, and certainly we see it in football as well, where you get commentators giving their opinion, and it is the biggest load of crap that you've ever heard in your life. You get ex-boxers, ex-footballers in football. They give their opinion, and it is the biggest load of bollocks as well. How many times have we seen ex-boxers, pro boxers give their pick of a fight, and it's talking absolute rubbish, or they comment on a fight that's just happened, and it's just like, what the hell are you seeing? They're seeing something completely different to every other man and his dog has seen as well. And we see it all the time, right? You can have certain biases towards certain boxers, but commentators should be totally independent, should be unbiased. And for him to come out with something like this, it's got to be, it's not even a wind-up. It's misplaced advertising, trying to garnish momentum for whatever he's trying to do. Look, the point has been made, and I think I need to reiterate it here, that Usyk is one of those boxers that you could probably put him into any generation and he will come out on top. There is another aspect here as well, that he didn't start off, he hasn't had most of his career as a heavyweight. So to label him in the same context as other heavyweights from the past, let's say, is totally wrong, because he's fought a lot of his time, and most of his time, at cruiserweight, and become an undisputed cruiserweight champion. So then he would have missed out on all those other fighters that he would have beaten along the way at heavyweight if he was a heavyweight, right? So the argument doesn't hold water. that he hasn't knocked out, he hasn't beaten as many heavyweights as any other heavyweight. It's because he hasn't fought that many. In a timeline, he hasn't fought that many. But that doesn't diminish what he is and what he's achieved. Also, when you're talking about boxers of the past, I always look at this from a pure sporting technology point of view as well. There's so many people, pundits, commentators, even fans, who look back at past boxing generations and think, oh, they were the best, they were amazing, they were amazing. It was amazing times in many ways because there was a lot more competition in a lot of the divisions, and there are a lot more worthy pound-for-pound competitors, and there's some great fights. But make no mistake, when you're talking about modern sportsmen and women compared to what they were used to be, you got to talk about the fitness, you got to talk about the nutrition, the training quality. It's so much better now than it was. And that's not to say that a boxer from the past, in this case boxer, couldn't beat a boxer of the current generation, or vice versa, right? But you would kind of lend, you hedge your bets towards a modern sportsman over an Asian sportsman. And that's why you can never compare generations, because it's unfair to compare generations, right? You can only say what's in your own generation. And Alexander Usyk is the best of this generation, no doubt, because he's beaten everybody. He's beaten everybody convincingly twice. So he doesn't have to keep on proving it. Now, for me, there is another argument, there is another discussion to be had, which is totally outside of what Kellerman has said, and basically saying, look, is Usyk aging out? Is he picking his opponents now, or, this sort of delay that he's having, this timeout that he's delaying? What about going after Moses Atoma? No, Moses Atoma is too young and all this kind of stuff. So there's an argument to say, well, should he have retired? I said, look, you should have retired. You should have retired. Or, certainly after the Dubois second fight, you should have retired for me. Just, you are right up there at the highest of the high. What you've achieved is unbelievable. So you should have retired. Not because you've diminished your ability in any way, but it's just that you've reached, you've got nothing else to prove. And there will come a point, any boxer will come a point against any opposition where you'll start to be accused of ducking, let's say Moses Atoma or Joseph Parker or whatever. And he just doesn't need that. He just doesn't need that accusation from arseholes who actually don't know what he's achieved, right? Or don't appreciate what he's achieved. Now, should he be fighting Joseph Parker? Yes, I believe that. Should he be fighting Caballero? Yes, absolutely. Should Caballero be fighting Parker, let's say for one final eliminator? Yes. This Parker against Wardley fights Saturday night. Look, interesting fight. It'd be really interesting. I made a video about it later on, so you can go and watch it. But in terms of overall, he's taking time out. He's holding up the division slightly, I'll give it that. But he doesn't have to be that boxer that has to go and prove himself and beating everybody to build up a whole line of scalps that he's done, just like past heavyweight champions of the world. He just hasn't had that time. But in the time that he's been given in the heavyweight division, he's beaten all the best boxers convincingly. And he's beaten them not with raw power, he's beaten them with boxing acumen, with ring IQ. That's what makes him so special. So to say he's overrated in the heavyweight division, you're talking absolute bollocks. Absolute nonsense. I have no idea what, it's almost like Ring Magazine, Turki Al-Sheikh, should be looking at what he said and say, hold on a minute. We've been employing this guy. Let's just get him out of here because he's talking absolute nonsense here. And he really needs to. I'm not saying I'm the biggest Usyk fan, but I appreciate what he is. Now you compare modern boxers, certainly heavyweights in the heavyweight division, compared to the older generations. Well, now they're bigger, they're more athletic in most cases, but they're bigger, more athletic. And they're not necessarily better boxers. Nutrition is better, training is better. You compare Muhammad Ali when he was coming up, he wouldn't even be a light heavyweight. He'd be a light heavyweight. He'd be a small cruiserweight. So now you're talking about big heavyweights, 260, 270, bloody hell. Bacoli, 300 pounds. Jarrell Miller, 300 pounds. These are big. Now, it doesn't mean that bigger size is better, of course. But you're talking about somebody who's coming up from cruiserweight. He's bulked up, but he's still 220, 225 and he's fighting 260s, 260, 270 boxers, and he's beating them convincingly. So for you to say that he's overrated as a heavyweight is just absolute nonsense. You don't know what you're talking about. Your words are totally misplaced. Absolute nonsense. It's bollocks. We know it is. We know it's bollocks. And he said it for, I don't know why he said it for. I don't know why he thinks it's a good thing to say. There is an argument to say, yes, he hasn't had his whole career in the heavyweight division, so his list of opponents isn't as widespread, as big as heavyweights, traditional heavyweights who've always been in the heavyweight division, or, champions of the past. Yes, 100%, because that is factually accurate. But to say he's overrated, which is just nonsense. He's beaten everybody, and the chances are he would have beaten. Now, there is a definite likelihood that if he continues to take on live opponents in the heavyweight division, yeah, at some point, he'll meet his match. But we're talking about an age thing here. We're talking about wear and tear thing here. We're talking about, if he goes up against a Joseph Parker, Caballero, I'd still favour Usyk. If he goes up against a Moses Tama, I'd still favour Usyk. 100%. 100%. It doesn't mean that, I'm right. It doesn't mean he's going to win. But, he's still that guy. He's still that guy who's good. It's not he's a heavyweight. He is a heavyweight now, but he's not that he is a heavyweight. He just brings that boxing IQ that most fighters in the world just do not have. And that's the issue. They do not have what he has. And for generations, they haven't had what he has. There are probably a handful of fighters, certainly in the heavyweight division, that have had what he's had. I'm talking in the whole of history. The whole of boxing history, there's probably been a handful of fighters that have been able to do it. That have had his ring IQ. That have had his ability to overcome the odds. So you're saying that he's overrated as a heavyweight? What an absolute load of nonsense. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. I say, if you like what I do here, keep on watching. Sorry about the intro there, but hey, we live and learn. Catch you again. Bye now.